We are less than 2 weeks away from the 2025 NBA Draft, and we have some new Warriors rumors and news to discuss on today's edition of Warriors Today by Chat Sports. I am your host, Tyler Smith, and in just a moment, we're going to talk about a new Brandin Podziemski injury update as, we did undergo that wrist surgery that we talked about, but there is some new information. And then we have some new reports from Warriors insiders Tim Kawakami and Anthony Slater, who went on the Warriors Plus Minus podcast, and kind of detailed a couple of things as far as how it relates to the Warriors offseason and heading into 25-26. But let's jump right in to this Brandin Podziemski injury news, as we knew that he underwent a wrist surgery a couple of weeks ago, and now he has underwent a second surgery this offseason as he faced a couple of injuries throughout the 24-25 campaign. The Warriors released a press release with the Brandin Podziemski injury update that read the following. Brandin Podziemski, Golden State Warriors guard Brandin Podziemski, underwent successful surgery yesterday to repair a core muscle injury. If you guys remember, Brandin Podziemski missed time due to that abdomen injury in the middle of the season. He is expected to make a full recovery and be ready for the start of training camp. Podziemski previously underwent successful left wrist debridement surgery on May 27th. And, they go in and talk about how he has been a pretty big factor for Golden State's roster over these past couple of seasons. Now, two surgeries, that is, it's a little concerning. They are minor, to be fair. The wrist thing was a little bit of cleanup, and then this core muscle surgery is gonna hopefully make him feel more comfortable out there on the basketball court, because clearly he wasn't down the stretch of this past season and into the postseason. When he came back immediately from the abdomen injury, his numbers were actually disgusting. Like, he came back in the 10-game stretch, he was averaging close to 25-5 on really good efficiencies. And even the stats you see on screen for the entire regular season don't tell the full story, because once the Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler and Podz was etched into the starting lineup for good, he was playing at an elite level and got his three-point efficiencies up to 37% when it was way below average for the first 30, 40 or so games of the season. And then you get to the playoffs and the counting stats are essentially the same, but the efficiencies go way down. Podz was asked to do a ton during this postseason run, especially once Curry went down with the hammy. But look, man, you see the stats, they look pretty identical, and then you get to the percentages, and they were absolutely atrocious. Podziemski went multiple games where he was shooting less than 15% from the floor, and for a Warriors roster that really didn't have many sources of offense in the half court, as far as guys who could just go get their own buckets, Podziemski really, really fell short here when his number was called. But he is poised, as far as next season goes, to remain in a big role. Doesn't look like Podz is being floated around in any sort of trade rumors this offseason, and with the salary that he makes, about $3 million, it just doesn't really move too much, and I'm not so sure how much interest there is around the league as far as Podziemski being a big trade chip. So he's poised to be back in a big role. Does that mean he's going to be starting the entire season next year for Golden State? I wouldn't guarantee it, but I would assume that that's probably in the cards. And Steve Kerr has talked about how Brandin Podziemski needs to be unlocked next season, that next year when he sees an open look, it's got to go up, because too many times during this past postseason, he passed up a lot of those opportunities and was too unselfish. Kerr wants him to be more of an offensive force in this Warriors offense. So with that being said, if you want Podz to be at 100% so that can happen at a high level for 25-26, go down below and send good vibes. Like the video, hit that thumbs up icon, and type Podz in the comments when you do so he knows we're showing him love. All right, now let's get into some new reports from a couple Warriors insiders. Tim Kawakami over there at the San Francisco Chronicle and Anthony Slater of The Athletic. Two guys who I take as the Bible when it comes to Warriors news and rumors. And they collabed on a Warriors Plus Minus podcast and kind of talked about a couple of different things during this Warriors offseason. And this one was big, where Golden State's going to be looking in free agency to potentially add some size this offseason, but it might not be a name that has been rumored around. Kawakami said this: I've said stretch fives before as a free agency target, but I don't think it's going to be stretch five now. I don't think it's going to be Brook Lopez. I think they're going to try and lean on Quinton Post, who's entering year 2. Look, it's no secret that the Warriors need more from their front court, and they need more from the big men on their roster, and they probably need to add external size this offseason. But it doesn't look like they're going to, try to bring in a player that's like Quinton Post. It looks like they're pushing their chips into the center of the table on the second-year player out of Boston College. So we'll talk about more about QP in just a moment. But, around the whole center position in general, Slater kind of came back and said that, they're not going to necessarily target a stretch five. And who knows if they're actually going to spend real big money on, and big money is in mid-level money, on a traditional center as well, as, those guys aren't necessarily the best puzzle pieces that would fit in a Steve Kerr 5-out movement offense. So I'm not so sure if Golden State's going to address their front court very much externally this offseason. It looks like they're going to be leaning a lot more into Quinton Post, who showed a lot of really solid flashes in his rookie year and got some big minutes in the postseason as well. This is a 25-year-old second-year player who really brought an element to Golden State's offense last year that they did not have as a stretch five. He was a two-way player for a large portion of the first half of the season, and then once the calendar year flipped to 2025, and in January, he became and got a standard contract with Golden State and played out the rest of the regular season as a member of the rotation and was a pretty big factor in the rotation. Was playing 15, 20 minutes a night in some instances and was providing a lot. He was really did not lack confidence whatsoever when it came to launching his shot from the outside, and he was really, really solid at it. I think he shot close to a 40% clip in his rookie year, so I'm excited to see what he can do in year two, but there are definitely some things that QP has to work on, like defensive mobility and just, I guess, being in the NBA and knowing players' tendencies and not being caught and baited into different fouls, because that was a huge problem in the postseason. These veterans would just get Quinton Post into the action, and they would, just one ball fake. This guy would be up in the air like he was jumping on a pogo stick, and they would draw a foul. So there's just some things that he has to work on and get more used to in the NBA, and I think he'll be very, very fine. He's also on a very cheap contract, which is friendly to Golden State's salary books. And we talk about, Brook Lopez potentially not being a factor or a name to watch anymore for Golden State. Well, a name that we just talked about as recently as yesterday might be off the table for Golden State as well. Ball Report on Twitter. Now, I'm not so sure how reputable they are, but they do have some decent scoops on the Dubs. And he said that the Warriors are unlikely to sign Bobby Portis in free agency due to the financial restraints. Golden State is expected to bring back Jonathan Kuminga, which means they won't have access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception without being hard capped at the first apron, something they'd want to avoid. So this isn't necessarily like a report or anything like that, but he is like kind of putting the tea leaves together as to what Golden State's going to want to do. Portis is a $13 million player option and could opt out to negotiate a deal, but unless the Warriors trade for him, signing him outright is unlikely. Expect Golden State to target cheaper bench options instead. Honestly, that I wish I never saw that tweet because I want to be optimistic about Golden State making improvements on this roster. Look, money and caps and aprons should not be a factor at all for the Warriors these next two seasons. Like, can you read the room a little bit? Can you do a little bit of math and know that your players are closer to collecting Social Security than they are to, reaching puberty? Like, it is a problem. You're run by a 37, a 36, and a 35-year-old player. You need to lean into that and shove as many, put everything you can into this Warriors roster for 26-27 or 25-26 and 26-27. It's a 2-year window. You're going to be the worst team in the NBA when Steph Curry leaves. Understand that. So do your best to give him the best chance to win a championship over these next two seasons. And with that being the case, you're going to have to use that non-taxpayer mid-level exception that you have. And I don't know, does Golden State really not want to be hard capped at the first apron? I guess that makes them a little bit less financially flexible potentially for next offseason, but man, time is ticking and these guys aren't getting any younger. So I'd want to use the $14 million mid-level. I'd want to use the biannual exception, which I don't think Kuminga makes any difference towards, but still, can they get something for this $8 million trade exception? I'm not so sure. If they're willing to send out, down the line draft capital, maybe, but it's all up in the air at this point. I really don't love the way that Golden State's offseason is trending at this point, but you never know. Things could change very, very quickly, and the offseason is looking to ramp up over these next couple weeks as we get closer to the draft. One player who I know will be rocking Warriors blue and gold next season is Wardell. So go get your jersey today, 50% off. How often do you see Steph Curry jerseys half off? Yeah, you can go get one at this link right here. chatsports.com/Curry City. Go get yours today. It's last year's City jersey, so they're throwing it for a little bit of a discount. But I love these unis, man. Go get yours today. Fresh Curry jersey, half off with our friends over at Fanatics. This link right here, chatsports.com/Curry City, will be clickable in the comment section and description of today's video. All right, let's talk about these reports from Slater and Tim Kawakami outside of the QP stuff. Well, a lot of these are going to be a little bit rapid fire, right? Anthony Slater said there's no noise on Kevin Durant to the Golden State Warriors when there was obviously, almost got done at the trade deadline. Draymond said that deal was at the finish line. All the reports have said that it was basically a done deal, but Durant backed out at the last moment heading to Golden State in February, and it seems like his market is leaning more towards San Antonio and a Minnesota rather than anything close to Golden State. Plus, the Dubs would have to give up Butler or Draymond, and that's just not happening. Now, Slater also said that, another story that we reported on yesterday is the Warriors are unlikely to pursue a Lauri Markkanen trade. And look, man, I said this yesterday. It was a complete nothing burger, and more than the Warriors unlikely to pursue the trade, I think the Jazz are more unlikely to trade him at all. So this was never a total non-story. Middle of June, guys got to hit their article quotas for the month, and Bill Simmons just wanted to say some funny stuff, and then Bovada made odds out of it. It's a complete nothing burger. Lauri, we had a chance last year, should have took the swing, but it didn't work out. Now this is the issue that I'm most kind of concerned with. Tim Kawakami and Anthony Slater, throughout the entire podcast, we're just operating and speaking under the impression that the Warriors will be bringing back Jonathan Kuminga. Look, do I think that Jonathan Kuminga can be a good basketball player in the NBA and honestly contribute to winning and be a positive factor out there? Yes, I do. He's 22 years old. But do I think that he can do it with the Golden State Warriors? No, I do not. And you could call me a hater for that. I don't really care. I think he's a square peg in a round hole that just does not fit for Golden State, and he seems like he's a little bit more concerned with his own personal production than he is for the betterment of the team. I think we've seen that time and time again. That's why Steve Kerr gave him the DMPs. So with that being said, with all the reports that we've heard from these Warriors insiders, how optimistic are Warriors fans right now? Scale it for me down in the comment section, 1 to 100. 1 being we are cooked. This front office needs to go, and we're not going to win shit in these next 2 years. 100 means you got full faith in Mike Dunleavy, Joe Lacob, Steve Kerr, Curry, whoever's in that brain trust up there in the Golden State Warriors front office, and they're going to make some good moves this offseason. Let me know what you guys think, 1 through 100. My take is this. I'm in the middle of the pack right now as far as how optimistic I am for Golden State because I think there's a lot of uncertainty still, too. You never know what phone call could land in your inbox these next couple of weeks as far as what a trade could look like or a sign-and trade potentially for Kuminga once free agency hits. But one thing I know is true. Running this same roster back with, like Ball Report said or like Kawakami alluded to, 1, 2 cheap free agent additions, that does nothing for you. It does not get you over the championship hump. And it's downright disrespectful to Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond, who are mortgaging their physical health and bodies night in and night out at these old ages. It's disrespectful to not want to improve this roster way more than just marginally this offseason, and that would require moving Jonathan Kuminga. Now, it is very complicated to get all that done, but I think that at the end of the day, even if the player that you get back is worth half the contract and might even put out half the production, he might fit double the amount better than Jonathan Kuminga does currently. So, in my opinion, it would be their best course of action to move off of that contract, find a sign and trade partner, get off of the money, and go use your assets in a way that is best suited to help this team contend for a championship. That will do it for today's edition of Golden State Warriors Today. Lock us in as your #1 spot for Warriors content all offseason long because when we get new reports from insiders, when we get injury news, when we get trade rumors, we're bringing you guys videos right here on the channel. So lock us in, hit that sub button. We'll see you guys all in the next one. And as always, let's go Dubs.